Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Dan Hoban, the founder of Sadire, Attire, a brand whose goal is centered around destigmatizing sadness to create a world in which sadness is a normal part of human feeling. Sadire is working to influence people to find humor and honesty in sadness to ultimately lead them to happiness. Dan, thank you for joining me today on Hopeful Conversations. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
I understand that you created the brand Sadire during a period of emotional struggle and depression in your life as a way to cope. I am wondering why you decided to create a clothing brand specifically. What drew your attention to making clothing, and how did you land on the name Sadire?
I guess around 2018, I was going through a pretty extreme time of just depression, of just being very, very sad and not feeling like I could communicate to others properly, to be able to talk about it, and really having all this energy that was, just very negative, kind of stuck inside me. And during that time, I was writing a lot of poetry, just like sad poems expressing about how I felt. And I didn't really necessarily want to release those online or anything like that. But I decided that one day I was like, I think this poem would look cool on a t-shirt. And so I went to a local screen printing place down the street from me, and I was like, hey, can you put this poem and this picture and put it onto a t-shirt? And um, in retrospect, I always laugh because it was the ugliest shirt I've ever seen in my life. But to me, during that time, it was like the first thing. Sorry, I live in LA, so the sirens can be kind of
That's
loud
all good.
sometimes. But it was it's such a moment where I just felt like I was being able to create from a place of sadness and express how I feel and put it onto something physical. And it really got me so excited, and I fell in love with the shirt, and I still actually keep it just as a reminder for myself. And
Awesome.
I kind of got addicted to that feeling of being able to express something that I haven't been able to express in a while. And then I just kept going and going and creating more. And Sadire, the name really came along. Almost it felt like magically, like I I was always into using satire to express myself and sadness, and I was working around a bunch of names like Sad Boy Clothing and Sad Clothing. But at the end of the day, the domain name and all the LLCs for Satire were available, and it just felt like almost like a gift and I was able to create it. And then I realized, wow, this is actually the perfect name to represent how I want to talk about sadness. And a lot of what we do with the clothing is to use humor or satire to be able to talk about sadness. And I think the point of satire was always, I never felt that I have been suffering from depression since I was very young, and I never felt like anybody felt the way that I did. And I didn't really connect so much to people just being, like, just be happy, just do this, just keep going. These positive things that I just couldn't connect to any of these. I'm not the only mental health brand, but I had trouble connecting with other mental health brands. And I never felt that there was like a cool way, and I'm not trying to make sadness cool, but I wanted to find a way to express it in a way that I connected with, that didn't feel forced, that felt authentic to me. And if I could make sadness not such a stigmatized thing, but something that I wouldn't say like I'm trying to glorify or make it cool, but I am making it artistic and expressionful and that kind of way. And so satire was really a way for me to create something that I felt that I wanted to belong in, and create not just clothing, but a way of expression in a way that people could see the clothing and relate to it and connect to people in that way.
That's very interesting. I suspect even with like that very first t-shirt that you created, you got a reaction from others. What was that like for you, that you were in a dark space and experiencing depression, to see people respond to your artwork and your expression? Was it positive? Because it kept you going, it created more. So what was that first expression or response like from others?
So, I mean, I think whenever you're creating something, it's not always a positive experience right away. I had a great experience in that my closest friends like knew I was passionate about it, and I, through my passion, was able to convince them like, yo, like this is cool, this is a good idea. So my closest friends were really passionate about it, but I would say a lot of people didn't understand it, maybe even ridiculed it, didn't think what I was doing was even possible to create a large brand. Like, why does anybody want to wear something that makes them sad? Some things that I heard
Okay.
from people. Um, I never let that
You had some
discourage me.
doubters.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think you do. That's normal, and then that was okay to me at that time. I don't think it bothered me because something felt right about it. Like I think a lot of times when you're on the right path, you can feel if something is right, and the only people who do matter are the people who actually care about you and know you.
Hmm. That's powerful. Who is your target audience for Sadire?
My target audience is people who I think it's my younger self. It's the company that I wish that I had to look at and to feel less alone when I was young. Because when I was young, I didn't feel like there's any brands that represented my voice of being sad and but not defeated by it. I think that's kind of really the tone of satire. It's like it's okay to be sad and not to be defeated by it and to be able to laugh at it at times and that it is a normal human emotion. And I think when I was young, I was just really alienated in that nobody seemed to be talking about mental health, especially 10 years ago. It wasn't, I grew up in a very, I would say like a male dominant culture where it was weak to talk about your expressions and feelings. And if you did that, you were a crybaby or you are just seen as
Mhm.
lesser. And so you always had to pretend that you were tough. And um, as I've gotten older, I realized that I don't think that's true, and I think that it's like I think it's more strong to be like honest and vulnerable and to be like, yeah, like I do feel these things. Am I going to let it destroy me? No, but yes, like this is a normal thing that we all feel, and I'm not afraid to talk about it or tell me because it doesn't matter what you think. I think in that way.
Hmm. It's very honorable. I agree. And we hear so commonly that young people still today feel so alone. Like that's what one of the barriers of using their voice or asking for help is they just feel like no one else feels the way that they could never imagine that somebody else feels a similar way to they do. They just feel alone in their feelings.
I totally agree, and I think we need to make it more normal to be able to talk about your feelings and expressions. And I think part of destigmatizing it is removing that, especially I think I can only talk on a male perspective, but for men, it's hard for us to. It's just always been seen as weak to be able to express our emotions, and I think I truly don't think so at all that's true. And I think some of the strongest people I know are some of the most honest and vulnerable people. And it's because they're so strong that they can actually be vulnerable and be truthful.
Yeah. It is. I feel empowered to be vulnerable. I don't know that I was entirely vulnerable as much as prior to my son's loss as I am now. And I don't know. It's very comfortable for me. I express how I feel. Sometimes it probably alienates other people. A lot of times people respect it. I try not to hide. I have to be authentic, living authentically. Otherwise, it's too heavy. It's
I agree.
removing the stigmas. While dealing with personal mental health struggles, why did you decide to focus your time on creating content for the greater society? In other words, why not spend your time rebuilding your own mental health instead of producing a product that would satisfy others?
That's a great question. I think they came hand in hand, and I was trying to both, while helping others, I was also helping myself. And I think that sometimes is part of the healing process. Um, I always felt like yeah, like I said it before, but I always felt like I was making a company for my younger version of myself. And I just knew that there was a lot of people who definitely felt the way that I did. And I, in some ways, was just trying to authentically represent how I feel as possible. And sometimes I felt like creating, like I actually don't have a choice in creating that. It's felt more like a mission that I needed to be able to do. Like I had to do this. Like this was kind of why I was here in a way. But
That's cool.
yeah, I guess there's many layers
That's
to it,
good.
but I'd say that's the biggest one.
There's many layers to it, just like most things in life. Sadire has written that their mission is to expose the problems with modern culture that are making us unhappy in the digital age. That was a quote. The mission is to expose the problems with modern culture that are making us unhappy in the digital age. What are these said modern cultural problems that are making us unhappy, and how is Sadire working to combat them?
I think culture is becoming actually like in a lot of ways less honest, especially with the rise of social media and this whole image of, only posting the highlights of your life on social media, trying to present something that you're not necessarily. Rarely do you go on social media and you see someone talk about how they feel or not. They're only just showing like, oh, like look at me at this amazing restaurant, look at this. And it also is trying to it's teaching people that to get their validation, to get their source of happiness from others. A lot of times people don't realize like they're posting on social media because they want others to see what they're doing, to validate that what they're doing is cool and to show an image of themselves. And that for me is like kind of the wrong way to go. And so we
Mm-hmm.
create a lot of products that talk about philosophy in ways about what I think is some growing problems in culture, which is the rise of social media, the rise of narcissism, um, the rise of basically just this fake world, and everyone's now using filters to even change the way that they look, and this is all becoming normalized, and it's no longer it's no longer good to just you're not enough to just be your normal self. You have to be this image of yourself, and I just think culturally that is going to have a really long-standing effect on the youth.
Yeah. It's, I don't know what we do to change it. And I feel like I'm 50 years old, it's not a problem just for our youth. It's a problem for all generations. Like everyone is living through that lens. You nailed it when you talked about like what you put out there and then what you're waiting for in response and how you're creating your self-worth from that. How do we change that? Do you want to talk about any of like a specific product? Like I'm looking on your website right now. Which one do you have a favorite right now?
The most popular item that we have is a phone case called Narcissist, and it's a Greek old mythology about Narcissus, where the word narcissus comes from, who is a man who fell in love with his own reflection, and through following his own reflection, he would always stare at a pond, and he fell in the pond and he drowned. I know that's kind of morbid, but the phone case itself is a mirror phone case that you can look at yourself, and the top half is the art piece, and the bottom half is supposed to represent the mirror.
Ah, I was looking at it earlier and it that makes sense. I was like, what is this guy doing? That's a mirror on the bottom part. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so it's really a satire on narcissism, and I think that the rise of social media has a lot to do with narcissism. So it was kind of an inside joke that when you use the mirror every time, that yes, you'd be using the mirror, but you'd be almost calling yourself a narcissist. So it's meant to actually, we use satire to raise the awareness of something. So we comment on it by actually presenting it in an exaggerated way. And then we hope that the response itself is to be like, oh, I am being this. Maybe I should be less vain. And so we try to use art in a way that brings awareness to ourselves in that way. And so that definitely is still our most popular product and one of the ones that really blew up during that time. But it's really difficult. I think I always use satire. I think satire is a really good tool to be able to comment on things in an interesting way and bring attention to it, but making it so ridiculous that it actually is like, oh, maybe I shouldn't. We actually are creating our own animation and our own TV show, and it's about a sheep who mindlessly and unconsciously follows the crowd and does what everyone's supposed to say, but it always leads to unhappiness. And he's trying to find happiness in this world. And the reason we did created in creating the show is because through the showing of sheep and people's, usually are being controlled, I think like in a way, they're being controlled by society of what other people think about them, that you have to do this in order to fit in. You need to, go to school, go to college, get a job, and you need to fit into the society. And sometimes that isn't, the best path to happiness that I found. And I think you need to find your own path. And so we created this animation, and for us, it was the way to show people that, oh, if we show you all the funny ways that you're acting mindlessly and acting without thought and acting like sheep, then maybe that would consciously wake you up and become less less like a sheep, ironically.
Ah, wow. That sounds super interesting. How far along are you? Like
Oh,
that's a,
we're pretty far along. It started as actually a digital collectible, and now I think there's over um, 3,000 people in the community. So it's really growing and it's getting like a nice little cult fan base. But we're hoping to, create plushies, toys, and a film. And for us, it's a way to, how do we change the culture? Well, we have to create some kind of something cool, something that people actually like that how do we make it cool to change the culture? Like we can't fight against it, be like, oh, I'm
yeah.
so mad that the culture is this way and we shouldn't be like this, with that. I'm almost like, let's ride the wave and then like make a commentary about it. And that's what satire is. It's not refusing sadness, it's accepting sadness and then altering its perception. And I think that's the way we need to look at all things about like sadness and mental health. It's like you can't fight it, you got to go with it and then kind of create some messaging to change people's perception on it from the inside out, like a
Hmm.
Trojan horse.
Well, you're creating like through the awareness and through the brand, you're really creating education, like because other people are paying attention, correct?
Yeah, yeah, and I
And
think
does that drive some societal change, hopefully?
yeah, if you can create a relevant, art cartoon or intellectual property that comes into popular culture, then you can maybe affect the culture. And, streetwear is the same way. It is a culture. So if we are a popular clothing brand, we have this kind of view and we're cool, then people will proudly wear the clothes. If, Justin Bieber wore like has worn our clothes, like it's like, oh, like if Justin Bieber liked this message, then maybe it's okay to talk about my feelings because our role models do. And so
Very
that,
cool. Justin Bieber, that had to be exciting.
yeah, that was really exciting. And that was kind of in the beginning too, before we were as successful as we are now. So I guess it just really connected with him. And, obviously, I think he's a good he's become a good role model for kids. So I'm very appreciative of him.
Can you tell us what COVID was like for the brand?
COVID for the brand was was interesting but challenging. Obviously, I think one of the major things that happened during COVID was mental health became a larger topic. I think it
I
was
agree.
completely like it was a very much more taboo and less spoken. But once everyone had to confront their emotions, when they weren't able to distract themselves any longer, because we have become a society of that's constantly distracted, that's never present, and we're encouraged to do so from, directly or indirectly from social media,
All of the
from
time. Yep.
from advertisements. It really forced everyone to confront how maybe they've always been feeling, but just never had the time to kind of reflect on. And I think with that wave, the the satire was able to people kind of understood it more because they were feeling things that maybe they haven't tried to confront in a long time. And it got a lot of success through a campaign that I was talking about called The Great Indoors, which was a visual representation of being stuck at home and desiring to be outside. So the way the actually whole campaign was shot was that there's a boy who's stuck at home, very, very bored, and the world inside is magical, where there's grass growing and there's trees, and he's wishing he was outside, but he's stuck inside. And then we created these clothing, like we like to say the most comfortable sweatpants and sweatshirts that you would
Which we
wear
all needed
inside,
during COVID.
that we all needed during COVID, that were actually in the color of the out, like something that would look like the outdoors. So called the Great Indoors, and it was the, like, green and yellow to almost represent like like John Deere colors. So it was a satire on not able to be outside, and I think that connected really with a lot of people, and so that really started um our success.
Yeah, because you had 2018 was just 2 years prior. So your brand was still kind of in its infancy prior to COVID.
Yeah, I mean, we had some hits here and there, but it wasn't until COVID that I was able to fully focus on it, and that it got that ability to fully resonate with others, I think, too.
Are you still one of the creators today now that this is your full time gig? Do you
Yeah,
get
I
to
mean,
create some of the artwork still?
I still am kind of, my brother came along shortly after COVID to help handle operations, and the team is much larger than it was. But during COVID, it actually was just me and my girlfriend at the time who helped me, Brooke, and that was really it. And then now it's a lot of people, but I still, we still create all the designs ourselves. Like I still am coming up with all the concepts, the shoots, the animations and everything like that. So yeah,
Very
it's
cool. That
still,
you look very creative from your website. It's like such a neat mix of, I don't know, it's very cool. That old television in there on the Great Outdoors page, like antenna ears and very kind of has a retro, speaks my language being 50. Very cool.
thank you.
We talked a tiny bit about this, but how has the increasing discussion of mental health in the media, education centers, and government systems influenced your approach to spreading and acknowledging mental health awareness?
Could you say that again? Sorry, I didn't process it
Yeah,
fully.
that's a big one. So I think during COVID, we learned, like, we started talking about mental health as a
Yeah.
society. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree that it's the conversation is still as definitely, like, we've made a lot of progress since COVID
Yeah,
in a positive direction.
I agree. Like, it's not so taboo anymore to talk about how you feel.
It's not as taboo. I think a lot of companies are making, are making movements in it. I think it's getting better. It's still a very difficult problem to solve. Um,
Yes.
in a lot of ways. I mean, we've been programmed for thousands of years that this is kind of like a negative thing. Don't talk about it. It's always been taboo. So it takes a while for the culture to change.
Yeah.
And we're still kind of going through those growth periods of, oh, what do we do? Well, like, what is taking care of your mental health? And um, how, like, I feel sad. Okay, now what? Now what do we do?
Yeah. I remember after my son died, my son he was an athlete and he liked Nike. He was 15 years old, and I remember Just Do It. And I remember like literally seeing that and like it really angered me. Like
hmm
I think I was in a not in a good space at that time for myself. I have not had diagnosable depression, but a grieving mother. And I just remember thinking like I can't just do it. Like today really today is really heavy. And I still like think of that moment when I see that brand sometimes. Like not everybody can just do it. Like that's not the way the world works. That's not how when you don't feel good, when you're struggling to smile, when you want to be real and say, my life kind of sucks right now. I can't just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually, I love that example of using Nike and that just do it kind of mentality. And then thinking, yeah, like it's not that easy. Like I wish I could do it. I don't know how to do it. Like I remember during the time of being depressed and I still have to just like, yeah, like I just like it's just like I can't get out of bed. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like I don't know how to get out of bed. I can't do it. I want to a degree, but like what's the reason to get out of bed today? Like I don't see a purpose in life and I can't just do it, you know?
Mhm.
And that kind of stuff, I wouldn't say angered me, but I was just like, yeah, it's not that easy. And you know, you go on Instagram online all the time, and people share these like posts of just like, you know, just do it and this. I'm just like, that's just not that's not helping. And in fact, maybe it's not. It's doing the opposite for me. And I've personally, I think coming from that understanding too and forgiving yourself for some days like you're not going to be able to do it is kind of is more healthy and being okay with that you know you can't not I don't want anybody to give up like you've got to get up eventually from the bed you know you have to make the decision but the more the it becomes a weird cycle you're like cool I need to get up but I can't and but I need to and like you have you're like in conflict with yourself and you start to like, hate that you can't do it and you're like why can't I do it and it actually gets worse and so I think people need to be more educated in how to conquer that and as I'm on my own search of trying to find happiness I still get bouts of depression and for me it's really like finding the tools and tricks that work for yourself and I'm not saying they're always applicable to everybody but you do after a while if going through depression you do find little tricks that you know that can kind of help.
Yep. Do you have a example of I was that was my next question. Feel like our conversation was leading into it. Like, what do you do for yourself to take care of your mental health? Tools and tricks. I know for myself, it's breathing. I do a lot of breath work when something either triggers me or causes me a situation of anxiety or causes me to just kind of start to slip down into a hole that I don't want to feed. Because I find that if I put my effort into breathing and paying attention to my breath, I can't hold the space for that thought. I can't entertain both. What do you do, Dan?
Breathing definitely really helps. um I think my hardest thing I think one of the hardest things that maybe a lot of people can feel is like it is getting out of bed um
Mm.
like I almost always make joke, like the bed is like a gravitational force, and the longer it takes you to get out, the harder it actually is to break free from the bed when you're depressed. And
Do you feel physically heavy? Do you feel like glued to the bed? I've read that.
it's like momentum based, right? And it's the longer I stay there, it's like that it's like the gravity is heavier, or it's like I feel more attached. And if I just break it right away, I can get up. So one thing I always do look forward to some degree, that I know is going to make me 1% happier, is that I like warm showers. That I'm like, all right, well, like if I can just get up and just get into this warm shower, I know that I like showers. I like hot showers. I can stay in that shower as long as I want. As long as like Dan, you don't have to worry about the rest of the day yet, because that's what makes you stop, right? You worry about what's the rest of the day look like. You look so forward to go, no,
Right.
I'm gonna do something. I'm just gonna
One
go to the
step at a
shower,
time.
one step at a
Cool.
time. So once I get in the hot shower, and usually the idea of the hot shower is enough to get me going. I'm in there and I'm like, cool, I'm up. Like I broke in the field. I feel a little bit better. Then when I'm in the shower, I go, all right, well, like today is gonna happen, no matter what. So I always do three things when I'm in the shower. I go, what am I thankful for? So like I always think it's like it's very much an energetic thing. You need to prime your energy, the way you feel, before you can actually break free from the constraints of like to get through the rest of the day. So I think the first thing that I always like to do is like I like to try to raise my vibration, or my how I feel. And so being grateful is like, all right, sometimes I go through the motion, like I'm just like, all right, like thank you, like I have my mom, my dad, my brother, that I'm in this hot shower.
The
I'll,
sun
the
came up.
sun. I'll look at myself too, like instead of letting my thoughts drift, I'll look at my hands and I'll be like, all right, cool, like my hands, I can move them. I'm here physically, and I'm grateful. And then from there, if you want to, you go, all right, like what would, I tried to say, thank you for, you know, giving me a wonderful day, or things that I want to happen. And then I say, thank you for allowing me this so I can help others in their mission. So I go, what do I want? Or what am I grateful for? What am I want? And what am I willing to do for what I am given? But always use the present tense of thank you for allowing me to help others, and
Huh.
to make that a present moment. So it's not outside of me, it is all in the present. And
Staying in the present. That's such a gift. It's so what our society, I think we struggle with. We either are called, some of us tend to look back, just rehash everything that was usually negative. We usually don't look back and see the positive things about ourselves.
mhm,
Or we're forward looking and just so hesitant and anxious and don't think that we're going to deliver. We're not going to live up to expectations of others, versus being present right now, today, in this moment. Like you were talking about the shower, and then the next step versus, oh my gosh, at 5 o'clock, I have to be in front of these people doing this. Well, that's at five
yeah.
o'clock. It's 6 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, we torture ourselves with, and one of our collections is called, the idea is called time travel for masochists. And it's this kind of expression that we are kind of time travelers. Like we visit the past and we get depressed about the past. And then if we go in the future, that's anxiety. And then present is kind of where peace
Yep.
is. And if you were to take a time machine, you would never go into the past to visit a bad memory. If you were, or you'd never go into the future where something bad is happening. Yet we do that in our minds constantly. And so
All the time.
it's best to stay present.
What's the
And
Arctic wolf on the travel tee?
oh,
The time travel set.
that's the
What's the
color.
representation?
Oh, that's
Okay.
just the
Oh,
color.
vintage black and Arctic wolf. I thought, I'm trying to see what the image is. I have to pull it up and look a little bit closer. That's me not being keen on
No worries.
streetwear. Relive your worst moments requires repressed memory. Cool. Any other collections you want to visit about?
Um, there's a lot. I mean, I'd love for it, if you guys are on the call, like you can check out our website at sadire.com. But yeah, I wanted
sadire.com.
yes. But I did want
And I
to
imagine on Instagram too. Sorry to
yes,
interrupt.
sorry, no worries. Yeah, so Instagram it's Sadire, Sadire, and the website is as well. And we try to make our shirt always with a feeling or a meaning. We don't like to make arbitrary clothes or things that are just, look cool. Everything really does have a purpose and tries to convey some kind of um, expression of ourselves. And I wanted to kind of continue that thought of the shower. It's like, yeah, we really want to control like just one thing at a time, and mm, you just got to do the next thing. And you really, it's really hard, like just to not be like, all right, like what's like you have something you don't want to do at 7 p.m. and that you're thinking about it all day and you torture yourself, but you still got to do that thing at 7 p.m. So you just got to stay as present as possible, do one thing at a time. And as I've gotten older too, like I think it's really underspoken, but people like health is so close to mental health, like just physical health. And I realize a lot of mental health, like I can fix, like is from weird small things like drinking more water. I realize like for some reason, like I am actually like can be a little bit happier if I drank a lot of water. You'll notice when you're depressed that like you'll actually stop drinking water because you don't even care. And like water is 90% of our body. So like I've been increasing my water intake, which has really helped with my mental health. I always do one physical exercise a day, which I like if you can do it, like whether it's walk outside or to go to the gym or pick something that you like, but almost one is net for me. I'm not saying it's necessary for everybody, but for me, it's like giving me the tools to be stronger. And then those are and eating healthy. I if you're paying attention to your body and you realize that like people don't understand like if you eat pizza like or something really fatty, if you're really paying attention to your people don't pay attention to their body, but their mental health like I've seen I'm so sensitive that my mental health actually I can feel it deteriorating after eating pizza or something like that's unhealthy. So if you are prone and you are sensitive, you got to kind of do extra stuff. Like not everyone needs to like do all these things, but these are things that I do know have helped me tremendously.
Thank you so much for just, I feel like that was a moment of vulnerability for you, but like for our listeners and for young people, like the connection between physical health and mental health and some of those examples, like give them a try. Like I just really appreciate that you use your voice in that capacity. I don't think very many people do.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, I think we'll wrap up. And we wrap up every podcast with the same question. And that is, what does the world need to hear right now?
I think the world needs to hear that sadness is it's not a bad thing. It's a normal human thing. It's hmm. Sorry, this is like a strong it's a strong question. What does the world need to hear? I mean, I do think I guess there's two things. Like I don't want to say that like depression is a real thing. It's something that absolutely exists and it can have many, many factors. And if you are depressed, um, there's nothing wrong with you in any way. And it's best to seek help and and there are small things you can do to get out of it. Like I thought maybe I'd be depressed my whole life and I'm working through it. And I think people if they had the resources to start with something small and it can help and it's not a bad thing that you're sad all the time and I mean, it's not a bad thing to be sad in general. Like sadness is just like it's a core human emotion, and we're like mortal human beings. Like our lives are just so incredibly complex that sadness is really just part of life in general. And there's nobody in this world that hasn't had periods of sadness. But if it is extreme, and there you should reach out for help, I do think, and you shouldn't be afraid to reach out because there are people who are knowledgeable about this and kind of can help you guide you through it. And so it's one way I think you need to not look at it as so negatively, and two, if it is something that is what you think, is extreme or you can't handle, it's completely normal and it's okay to reach out for help. And I think people will be surprised at how much other people want to help you.
I agree. I agree. Thank you, Dan, so much for being a guest today on Hopeful Conversations. To our listeners, check out the brand, sadire.com. And until our next episode, remember, hope, hold on, pain ends. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.